Hello again, music lovers, and welcome to Matt and Cheryl's Gen Excellent Playlist. I'm Matt.
I'm Sheryl.
And the man in the middle is Mike Bott, Cheryl's husband. Sheryl and Mike co-own the Silver Platters chain of record stores. I'm the play-by-play voice of Portland State University and the Arizona Diamondbacks minor league baseball affiliate Hillsboro Hops down here in the Portland area. But once upon a time, Sheryl and I worked alongside at a wonderful store called Silver Platters in the Northgate neighborhood of Seattle. No longer are they located there, but you can find Silver Platters up in Linwood, Bellevue, and would you say that it's the anchor store in SoDo, even though your original location is Bellevue? I think it's safe to say anchor store, SoDo, right?
It shares anchor store status with Linwood has become pretty big.
Really? Okay.
But SoDo is the largest.
Yeah, SoDo's got it's got the space down there. Well, we're going to wrap up 1977 on this episode, and Sheryl and I were just joking about this the other day. We've been on 1977 for it seems like months, but we did all these special episodes. We had our Thanksgiving show, we had our Christmas show, our New Year's show, and then our tribute to Christine McVie with a show completely dedicated to Fleetwood Mac. So we're going to finalize 1977.
Plus, we just had a lot to say about 1977. So, I mean, we're adding like 10 songs to the playlist, I think, just from this one year.
It's an eventful year in music. We will round out our playlist with my final song selection, Cheryl's final song selection, and Mike is going to chip in with our 10th song in the playlist. However, the first song that he submitted, Sheryl and I vetted, and we had to say, nah, we're not going to put that on the playlist. So we've already taken some editorial liberties, I guess you'd say, with the playlist. No Debbie Boone, You Light Up My Life. And the reasoning behind that. So every year on our playlist, we're going to take two of the biggest hits of that year. And Mike, I'm sure, knows this. You Light Up My Life was not only the biggest hit of 1977, it was the top-selling song of the 70s in the United States. However, our Out There was not really that big of a hit outside the country. So we tend to take the two biggest hits globally and start our playlist there, and then pick a couple other big hits and then round it out with personal favorites. So that's how we got around the whole Debbie Boone issue. Sheryl had a submission for 77 that I kind of suggested wouldn't sit too well on the playlist, so we left that one aside. I had a song on the album of the year that I'm going to divulge finally on this episode, but decided against it again because it just wasn't really, it didn't fit in on a playlist in a group environment, although it's a brilliant song. Anyhow, Mike was, so you were a teenager in 77, 13 years old. So you'd already long established musical taste and identity there.
I wouldn't,
I
was still growing in my music because I was buying some music, but by far most of my music ingestion was through the radio, and I was still more of an AM guy than an FM guy. Although I was starting to listen to more FM stations at that time.
Mike, before we get to that, so I just want to. So now, Sheryl and I established this early on. I had music in my life from a very, very young age. I was 2 years old when I had a record player and records, and my dad working a radio station would bring stuff home. So a very early start. Sheryl, much later than I. When would you say? How old were you when you first started really having your own music that you could play?
Oh, it was 4. I remember vividly loving the Banana Splits theme song, and it became available.
1 banana, 2 banana, 3 banana.
Yeah, you could get the single by turning in box tops from one of the Kellogg's cereals. And you could get the 45, and we did that, and I got the 45, which I don't have anymore. It disappeared, but that was the start of loving music.
As a longtime record store employee, now proprietor, you could probably confirm this, but that Banana Splits single, I can't imagine it's easy to come by one that isn't just completely beat to hell.
Yeah,
because it would have been mainly little kids.
I was on a panel of people talking about vinyl collecting at Mopop like 10 years ago, and one of the people on there was Charles Cross, who is fairly famous up here in the Northwest for writing and
former editor of the Rocket.
And I brought up during this, we were all asked what was our first vinyl purchase, and I used that as my first. And he said, I just found a copy and I had to pay $250 for it.
$250 for the Banana Splits 45?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, because
for a nice copy.
I can't imagine. Yeah, I'm sure it's hard to find a nice copy. Two bands come to mind when I think of, and I'm hitting thrift stores practically every day. I mean, I get around a lot, and two bands in particular, for me, it's practically impossible to find their albums in any sort of decent shape. One is Creedence Clearwater Revival, and the other is the Monkees. Those albums are always totally thrashed. And almost anything on Motown. Mm-hmm. And what does that tell you? It tells you that these records were
well played.
Loved.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, loved not in the sense that they were fetishized and protected.
Yeah.
but
they were
used
played
constantly. Yes. Not only played, but played probably in groups and party type environments where they were exposed to many elements.
Yeah, the record players of the time weren't as forgiving and nice to the records as they are today.
Let's get on to your Mike's 13-year-old self in 1977.
Yes.
Now, Sheryl and I would have been 7, 8 years old in 77. And of course, we've already talked about the cultural phenomenon that was Star Wars that year. Clearly, that was a big deal for you as well.
Star Wars was everywhere, and the song that you won't allow me to make
to put on our playlist,
to
ruin our playlist,
which basically for me embodies 1977, was something that you could really only hear on the radio. It was sold as a single, but it was hard to find out here in the Northwest, and it was by a record producer who had been producing records since the 50s, and he would do these novelty records, and his name was Dickie Goodman. And in 1976, he had his first big hit with a novelty record called Mr. Jaws. And what Dickie Goodman would do is have this humor story, kind of news story that would go along, and the answers of the people being interviewed were song clips. And this is still done today. Jimmy Fallon does it. He has a bit where he does it in his opening every so often. And Dickie Goodman was the one who invented this. And in 1977, he put out a 45 that was played a lot on AM radio called Star Warts. And
Star Warts.
Yes.
Warts.
Yeah. And I do remember hearing this.
And so I didn't ever have the record, but that encapsulates 1977 for me because he would only use music from that year. So imagine a whole Star Wars thing where you've got little clips of some of the hits of 77 thrown in there. In
fact, a lot of the songs are songs that we've already used on our playlist. Like The Joker was one of them. There's a few that I was like, oh, we did that song.
Yeah. The other thing is that at 13 years old, I was really into comedy. I was into humor. I was a budding cartoonist. I actually was getting, by 13, published. Some of my art was being published in the newspapers. And so I really
You were
liked...
a connoisseur of Mad Magazine.
Yeah. Mad Magazine was big. Comic books. And so that novelty song kind of is right in my sweet spot for what I was at that time in 1977 and what I like to listen to. However, there were actual songs that I really liked, and I talked about the whole listening to AM, but starting to go over to FM radio. And 2 songs from 77 that I remember hearing on both AM and FM that I really liked was 10cc's The Things We Do for Love and Al Stewart's Year of the Cat. Both of them I really liked. I'm going to say that Al Stewart's Year of the Cat was a transitional song for me because it felt more adult than I felt, but I still liked it. But I knew that it was something that more adult people liked than what a 13-year-old kid should like.
It seems like an
The
adult
Things We Do for Love
song.
was bippy boppy enough that, it sounded like something that could be listened to by everyone. But Year of the Cat, there was a coolness about it.
It's like a novel.
Well, another one that was big then, but I didn't really listen to it that much at that time, was Steely Dan, Asia. Steely Dan's Asia was one of those that you knew it was more
Steely Dan's pretty
sophisticated than what you were supposed to be at 13 years old.
Yeah.
Right. What would have been your AM music station? Would you have been listening to KJR at this point?
KJR, yeah.
KTAC?
KJR was really big at that time.
I listened to KJR and KTAC, which was maybe the Tacoma station. KTAC.
Yeah.
You just put that together.
I just put that together. I'm quick. Yep.
But 10cc I had already known about a little bit, and I just liked the
I'm Not in
sound
Love was already a hit. Like, you knew that song.
Yeah.
And I'm Not in Love almost made our playlist. Mm-hmm. I think Sheryl changed her mind at the last minute.
That's right. It was going to be my pick. Yeah.
And but I also really liked Stevie Wonder's Sir Duke.
Mm-hmm. That was close one for me.
And Thelma Houston's Don't Leave Me This Way.
It's a good one too.
Really liked that song. And
were you buying 45s? Like, did you have singles?
I had bought a few 45s.
What was the first 45 you bought?
The first 45, well, the first one that I purchased with my own money was Queen, Killer Queen.
Ooh, good one. Real good one.
Yeah, that was the first. I purchased Philadelphia Freedom, but this was before 77.
2 songs that were bubbling up close to being playlist choices for me.
And then I bought the Bee Gees' Nights on Broadway. And I bought that to give to Ann Hansen as a gift, who lived up the street and I was infatuated with. And I actually took the 45 wrapped up.
Has Sheryl heard this story before?
Yes. I took it up to her door and then chickened out. And I still have that single. But I didn't buy many singles in 77. One that I thought about buying, I remember being in Pay and Save. That's where we'd go a lot down in Renton, and they had a 45 section, a good 45 section. Was the Spinners' Rubberband Man. I really liked that song too.
Love the band. Were you excited when that commercial started using this? You remember that commercial a few years ago? I can't remember what it was for.
What was it for?
I don't remember being excited about it because I've heard it so much now. It doesn't have...
Hey, pay yourself for the rubber band. Man. That's a great song.
Yeah.
And nowadays, every commercial has a song in it.
It's really something how the tide has turned regarding commercial use of music, because for a lot of artists now it's vital. It's one of the ways they can make money.
Right.
It's one of the few.
It's one of
the few ways.
And really, when it happened initially, when Michael Jackson bought the publishing rights to the Beatles catalog and he used Revolution in the Nike ad, that was one of the first times that was ever used. That a song was ever used in a commercial, and it was a big deal. It was like sacrilege.
A big part of the Doors story was, they were going to allow Light My Fire to be used in a car commercial, I think. And
Pete Townsend has been doing it for years. He's been letting his songs, and he's like, you know what? Hey, it's just another way for me to make money. And, I don't see anything right. It's my song. So, but see, the reason why it was such a big deal with the Beatles song is because it wasn't them. It was Michael Jackson that was allowing this to happen.
Right. I don't know. I'm kind of ambivalent about the whole. I do remember when I first heard Buzzcocks, "What Do I Get?" being used in a commercial. My head just about fell off. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah,
and or Nick, Pink Moon by Nick Drake being used in a Volkswagen.
That was an early one. That was Volkswagen ad.
And I don't know if you know this about me. I'm a very long time Nick Drake fan. And by that time, I had turned on a number of people onto Nick Drake. And that commercial aired first on Thursday night on NBC. I can't remember if it was during Seinfeld or Friends. And when it occurred, I was just like, oh my Lord, what's going on? And I remember I got a few phone calls from people like, did you just see that? And
it was a big deal.
And for the next few days, people were asking me, what did you think? And a lot of people were angry about it because it was commercializing Nick Drake. And I had a different take because Nick was always very depressed because he didn't think people were listening to his music. And he had passed long before this happened. And I basically said, if there is a heaven and Nick's up there watching this, I'm guessing he's smiling because for the first time, the masses were being able to hear Nick Drake, and it rejuvenated.
There's that.
It rejuvenated his catalog.
The commercial was very artfully done.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I thought.
Yeah, I think so too.
One thing I want to say is this had been a phenomenon in the UK long before the United States, where songs would have new life because they were used in commercials. I know a lot of Levi's commercials put songs back at the top. And I don't know when this started.
What was the song that we did?
Long before.
There was a song we did for the playlist.
The Joker.
Oh, The Joker. That's right.
Joker.
Yeah, that it went back up in the charts
Joker
in the early 90s, and it was
1990
because of a Levi's commercial. Yeah.
Right.
And actually, this kind of plays into my playlist song.
Yeah. Well, I'll finish with my. You were talking about what 45s I bought. I do remember that I can't remember. I don't think I bought it. I think that it was a gift from my parents, but I'm not quite sure. I just know that one album that we did get that year that we liked to listen to was the Styx Grand Illusion, which the A side is pretty great. The B side is
not so
forgettable.
But the A side has one of my favorite songs, "Fooling Yourself," Angry Young Man, one of my favorite Styx songs. Okay. And actually one of my favorite songs of this year.
You're more of a Tommy Shaw. More of a Tommy Shaw.
Yes, I love the Tommy Shaw.
And I remember that we also got, and it was close to that same time, ELO's Out of the Blue, which came out in 1977, and an amazing album. Still.
Oh, yeah. Probably their best album.
Probably when I was that age contemporarily, that had to be one of my favorite album covers.
Yeah.
Yes.
With the spaceship.
Which leads me into my next thing about living in 77 and music and albums. And I talked about going to Pay and Save and that they had an amazing 45 section. They didn't have that big an album section. But if you went to the Bon Marché or Sears at that time had a fairly large record section, and it was so fun just to go through and look at the art, just the album art. And in 77, there were two albums that came out that, being an artist, really hit me hard. I never bought these albums, but I'd stop and stare at them forever while going through the record section in 77. The first one was Kiss, Love Gun, which I was into comic book art, and they had already used Ken Kelly for a previous album cover.
Destroyer?
Yeah, Destroyer. And they used him again for Love Gun. Ken Kelly was a famous fantasy comic book painter / illustrator, along the lines of Frank Frazetta, who was very big in that world. And Ken Kelly did the two album covers. And as an artist, you just had to marvel about, look at there. It's like superhero stuff, but it's real. It's not,
made up characters.
You see on. It's really hard for me to look at the art, the actual comic books from 77 anymore, because they're printed on such low quality newsprint, and just the registering problems and the colors and back then, I loved it, but it really showed the lack of range that could be done in that medium. But there were artists like Ken Kelly and Frank Frazetta, and vehicles like Heavy Metal Magazine and Epic Magazine and Creepy Magazine that used higher quality paper, higher quality printing standards, and could recreate much better, more realistic art. And Kiss paid homage to that with those album covers. And then the second one, I was really into cartooning and especially caricatures. I'd been doing a lot of studying on some of the famous caricaturists of the time. And there's one who is just amazing, who have been around since the 50s, Al Hirschfeld. And Hirschfeld got famous for doing Broadway playbooks and Broadway posters in the 50s and the 60s for plays. And his caricatures, he would insert someplace in the drawing, sometimes multiple times, the name of his daughter, Nina. And so it became, not only were they great caricatures and great artwork.
I think I know the album that you're going to.
Yeah.
And he was commissioned to do an album in 1977 for a rock band.
Aerosmith,
yes.
Right?
Yes. Draw the Line.
Yes.
And looking, I just had to marvel at that album cover and how much in just simple line he got what that ugly group of guys look like.
Well, and considering how awful their first album cover was, the self-titled album, their first couple of albums, the album art leaves a lot to be desired. So they started to figure some things out by the middle of the decade. I haven't listened to that album yet. I'm curious to. I mean, they're coming off the high of
it's good.
Toys in the Attic and Rocks. Yeah,
it's good.
I think that album is more famous for the cover than anything else.
It's not Toys in the Attic,
which is a brilliant album, I think. So, Mike, before we swerve back to me, we got to pin you down for one song from '77, not Star Wars.
Yeah,
but
we've already nixed that one.
What song are we going to put on our playlist?
I think, as I said at the very start, I think that the one that I would put on the playlist is 10cc's The Things We Do for Love.
Mm-hmm.
You'll get no objection from me on that one, sir. So I'll ask Mike, but you too, Sheryl. I mean, how deep does your appreciation or knowledge of 10cc's catalog go?
Mine is very shallow.
I think I've got all of their albums.
So I'm only just starting to get into them, and primarily the first two albums, the self-titled and Sheet Music. Yep. I think generally Sheet Music is considered to be maybe their best album, or at least the superior of those two. I actually prefer the debut album. But what I'm curious about, now you know a little bit about their backstory. Have you listened to the music that they, or the Neil Sedaka album that they did, where they were his backing band?
It's been a long time.
That's interesting, actually, because I forgot we had talked about this at one point, but I was thinking of Neil Sedaka when I was listening to this song, and I was like, this has a real Neil Sedaka feel to it. And I actually even went back and listened to Sedaka's Back, and I was like, is that where I'm getting that feeling? But I forgot that they were his backing band.
Right. On at least one, maybe two albums.
Yeah.
But before they were a recording entity as 10cc, they'd set up their own studio. And I think their goal was to run this studio and provide the musical backing for other artists and maybe do some songwriting as well. But there's this whole laundry list of songs that they played on before that first album.
Yeah.
Including that Neil Sedaka album. Of course, the Hot Legs album, that's essentially 10cc. Neanderthal Man was the hit song. And then you got the history of the individual members. So with Graham Gouldman being one of the great songwriters of the 60s with hits like Bus Stop and For Your Love. And Eric Stewart, I think, was in Wayne Fontana. And I want to say he replaced Wayne Fontana in the Mindbenders.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I can't remember which of their hits that he sang, if it was Game of Love or what was the other big hit?
Groovy Kind of Love. Groovy Kind of Love.
Yeah, Groovy Kind of, I think that's the one that he sang on. Groovy Kind of Love. Yeah, fascinating group, but the things we do
Godly
for love.
And Cream and all the stuff that they did.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just producing too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a whole wealth of great music there to enjoy.
But that song especially, I feel, is very Beatlesque. I mean, they always had that kind of Beatlesque sound to them, but that song really kind of like, and maybe it's more because it's of the era too, and that's when the Beatles were doing solo albums in the in the mid to late 70s, but it has that.
And it's got that great celestial bridge.
Mm-hmm.
That's really evocative of that era with the kind of synth sounds, the kind of the spacey synth sounds of that era.
Yeah.
Love it. All right. So the first song to add to our playlist, Things We Do for Love, 10cc. My album pick for the year, I've been hemming and hawing on this and delaying it till the last possible minute. It's interesting. We talked about this in the last episode too. The songs we're choosing for the playlist, very poppy. The albums that we're choosing for each year tend to be more rock, at least for me.
Yeah.
And this is going to be no exception. This is one of the hardest rocking albums I've ever heard. And it's the debut album by an Australian group called The Saints. The album's called I'm Stranded. I''M in parentheses, Stranded. The title track on the album was released as a single in 1976. And this is one of the earliest punk singles put on vinyl. In fact, this came out before anything by the Sex Pistols, before anything by the Clash, before anything by the Damned. This was on record. The Saints were 4 young guys from Brisbane, Australia, very conservative area politically. And these guys, the 2 main characters in the band, the Saints, the guitarist Ed Cooper, and it's spelled Kuepper, Cooper, and the lead singer, who was named Chris Bailey. They were both sons of immigrants, both born outside of Australia. Cooper born in Germany. Bailey was actually born in Kenya and then spent part of his childhood in Belfast in Northern Ireland before his family emigrated to Australia. They released their first single in, I want to say, summer of 1976. The Ramones, at this kind of around the same time, put out their debut album, their self-titled album. But this was one of the first really examples of punk rock put on vinyl. And Brisbane, very isolated. They weren't really aware of what was happening at CBGB at this time. They weren't really aware of what was bubbling up in London at this time. They kind of came by it on their own. The album is just ferocious from start to finish.
Yeah, it's
very
relentless.
raw, very relentless. Ed Cooper, unheralded guitar here. And really, I got into the Saints around the time Sheryl and I were working together at Silver Platters in the early 90s. I got exposed to Ed Cooper purely by accident from working at a record store. I was at Warehouse Records, the old Warehouse Record store at 45th and Roosevelt in the U District. And just one of the freebies I took home was, I believe it was a cassette, wasn't even a CD, of the album that Ed Cooper had out at the time. This is a small window of time where he had an American record deal. And this is the late 80s. He put out an album called Everybody's Got To. And I knew nothing about it. Never heard of him, knew nothing about it. It was just something I was given for free. And I probably didn't even listen to it for a long time. And then I wonder what this is all about. And it struck me. It was like, oh, this is really good. I like this. So,
and back then, we didn't have Spotify, we didn't have YouTube,
exactly.
And you either had
internet
to like specifically go and buy something to hear it, or there were a lot of things like that. We had the advantage of working at a record store where we had promos and things that were just giveaways that we could take home and listen to. And I had a lot of them were on cassette.
You're both forgetting we also had customers that had all sorts of stories to share with us that would come in and want to tell you about the great things that they knew about.
Oh yeah, I never listened to them.
Well, I came upon some good stuff at Silver Platter because we used to take trade-ins too at Silver Platters and returns. And I remember just people were trading in stuff, saying, "Hey, I'll give you $5 for that." Yeah, probably breaking the rules, but I got some great music that way. But anyway, so this Ed Cooper album, and I was like, wow, this guy's pretty good. Didn't know anything about him, so I just tried to dig up as much information as I could. And then I find out he's in this legendary punk band called The Saints that I knew nothing about. And the next thing that I got, I believe, would have been The Saints' third record, which was called Prehistoric Sounds, which sounds nothing like their debut, but it's a very interesting album. So the debut album, it's just relentless, aggressive, abrasive, but still tuneful punk rock music. And what really set them apart for me, Ed Cooper, in-your-face guitar sound. He played a Gibson SG. Now, the Gibson SG guitar, if you don't know guitars, it's that one, it's Angus's guitar. That's a Gibson SG. Pete Townshend's guitar at Woodstock.
Yeah.
That's an SG.
Yeah.
When you see somebody playing a Gibson SG, you pretty much know they're not going to be playing folk rock. It's going to be harder. It's going to be harder edge music. Tony Iommi, Black Sabbath, played a white Gibson SG. It's my favorite guitar sound. And this thing is cranked up to 11. Nothing fancy. It's just volume to the max.
Yeah.
So the single I'm Stranded, they're basically best known for 2 records. That one, their debut, just because it was one of the first punk rock singles. The other one was called This Perfect Day. Now, they self-recorded I'm Stranded. They financed it themselves. It was a DIY effort. They recorded it in Brisbane, produced like 500,000 copies, distributed themselves. Now, when you think of the pioneer punk rock bands, who do you think of? Sex Pistols, Clash,
yeah.
Ramones.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the big 3, right?
Yeah.
All of them on major labels.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Clash was on CBS Records. The Ramones, well, I guess Sire was independent, but it had a little more weight behind it. And then
Sex Pistols were on EMI.
Sex Pistols, they were on EMI, then they were on A&M for about 5 seconds, and then they ended up on Virgin. So when you think of punk rock, you think about the DIY spirit, but the original pioneers, most of them had some money behind them.
Yeah.
They had some management.
By the time they were recording, yes.
Right,
yeah.
Yes. The Saints, nothing like that. These guys, and this is a song that had been kicking around. They'd been playing together for 3 years at this point. So they'd really been playing this kind of music in this kind of style since, I don't know, late 73 into 74. Very influenced by the Stooges. That would probably be the number one influence, but drawing on a lot of historical influences. So Ed Cooper's guitar cranked up to the max. And then Chris Bailey, the vocalist. So he's an Irishman living in Australia, born in Africa, spent time in Belfast. Incredible looking guy. If you go onto YouTube, there's an amazing live clip of these guys in full flight playing in Sydney, Australia, 1977, called Paddington Hall. Chris Bailey is this hulking guy. He's a beast. Looks like somebody you definitely don't want to mess with.
Mm-hmm.
Long hair, okay. He's got this long curly hair. He's kind of got this Jim Morrison thing going with the hair.
Pretty unusual for a punk band, really. Yeah.
It is. So when they were first getting their act together and finding their sound, the word punk isn't really a part of the lexicon.
Yeah.
They never described themselves as punk rock, but they got lumped in with these other bands that started to emerge in England and New York, and they hated it. They resisted. And Chris Bailey's immediate reaction when he saw what punk represented in these places, particularly in London, England, which really turned out to be more style, more description of style than music, haircuts and clothes than music. And he wanted nothing to do with it. So as soon as he saw basically the perception abroad of what punk was and what you were supposed to look like, short cropped, spiky hair, torn clothes, whatnot, he immediately started growing his hair out. Now, the bassist already had hair down to about his waist, Kim Bradshaw.
Well, none of the real punks would ever use the name punk or go by that.
And
like, that was given to them by the media.
The godfather of punk, Iggy Pop, couldn't stand that term either. He thought it was a pejorative term and resisted it too. But So he does not look like your typical punk rocker. But in that same concert they did at Paddington Hall, there were 2 bands in Australia in this early punk wave, the Saints and Radio Birdman, who are based in Sydney. And their guitarist was actually a Detroit native.
Yeah.
Now, the Saints are drawing on that Detroit sound, Stooges, MC5, the just heavy rockin' sound of the late 60s, early 70s. Radio Birdman had a honest Detroiter in their midst playing guitar, Dennis Tech. But the lead singer, Rob Younger, he had hair down to his waist too at that time. So none of them really fit the look, but the Saints certainly fit the attitude. Very antisocial. Nobody liked them. They rubbed everybody the wrong way. They basically gave no Fs. And that's what the beauty of this live clip too is. It's all out there for you to. There's no image at all. They're wearing their regular clothes. There's no theatrics on stage, although you can't take your eyes off Chris Bailey. I mean, he's not dancing around or doing anything, but he's like a Morrison. And
he's like slumping down on the stage.
Yeah. It's really kind of a Jim Morrison type persona. Yeah. But it's the vocals that are just so amazing. I mean, it's like Van Morrison combined with Mick Jagger and Phil May of the Pretty Things. Just that he's got that Irish soul. He's got that kind of raspy drawl and adds this soulful edge to their music. Now, you don't hear there would be soul influences in their music in later records. You don't really hear it so much on the debut. It's just flat out in your face, fast-paced, hard-nosed rock. But by their second album, they're starting to bring in these soul influences. In fact, the first single off their second record, Eternal Yours, was called Know Your Product. And it's like Stax mixed with punk. It's got these great horn charts, and it was a complete failure. And the album itself didn't do so hot as well. So they put out I'm Stranded. They mailed a bunch of copies to England to these magazines, and they got these rave reviews. And the most famous one, I think, was Sounds magazine that said, single of this week and every week. One of the great
That's a good one.
music reviews. So obviously, all of a sudden, there's this tremendous interest in this group. They hadn't even played outside of the town of Brisbane at this point, and they could barely play in Brisbane because Brisbane, and if you follow the lyrics and the vibe of the band, Brisbane is like this super conservative, practically a police state run by this overbearing, or the premier of New South Wales. And kids are constantly being hassled by cops. Parties are constantly being broken up. Nowhere to play, nowhere to go at night, nothing to do. It's the basic punk theme, you know. But they send out these records to England. They get this interest from over there. They go to London. In fact, they got signed to EMI because EMI in UK called up EMI in Australia and says, you need to sign these guys. You need to get your ass to Brisbane, get these guys on your label. So they did. Their first album came out on EMI Records after the self-release single. And the single is on the album. The B-side is probably my favorite track on the album. Now, I'm Stranded is a great song, but the guitar is mixed too low for me. The vocals are mixed higher than the guitar. The B-side is the opposite, where you got Ed Cooper's guitar is just right in your face in one of the great guitar sounds of all time. The song's called No Time. And the only reason I didn't put it on the playlist for 77 is because it was released in 76 as a B-side. But they ended up putting it on the album at the last minute. They replaced a song called Untitled and put No Time on the record. But one last thing about the album before I move on to Sheryl and her song choice. My song choice for this album would have been a song called Messin' with the Kid, which is the last song on side one.
Yeah.
So the album starts with I'm Stranded. It goes into another just killer punk song called One Way Street. And then the last song on side one, Messin' with the Kid, is a total departure from the songs that preceded it. It's slowed down, and it sounds like the greatest Neil Young and Crazy Horse song that they never recorded. It's longer. It's about 6 minutes long, and it's got this total Neil Young Crazy Horse vibe.
Yeah.
And it's basically about what I was saying about living in Brisbane, being young, having nothing to do, nowhere to go, no hopes for improving your life. And it is a wonderful, wonderful song.
I like that
we didn't
song
put
too.
On the playlist. Yeah. Didn't put it on the playlist. Just a little too dirgy to really fit in there. But brilliant, brilliant song. And then side two rolls around and it's boom, boom, boom.
Oh, it's so in your face, just relentlessly in your face. And really, like, a lot of the lyrics are so unintelligible. And just he's just got this like wow, wow, wow kind of, but it's not. It's still melodic. It's still melodic and listenable.
Yes.
It's not like total just. It's not the kind of punk that you just can't listen to it. It is actually really listenable, but it just hits you, and it just keeps hitting you over and over again.
Yeah, many guitarists in Australia are very envious of the guitar sound that Ed Cooper would get. And there's two long songs on the record, the two side closers. Side one ends with Messing with a Kid, and then Nights in Venice, which is just a beast of a track. And the guitar riff, very reminiscent of Communication Breakdown by Led Zeppelin. And that song would stretch out much longer in concert. And it was kind of like their guitar freak out song. Again, very Stooges-esque, where Chris Bailey would go on walkabout off the stage into the crowd, and just an incredible, incredible band. this isn't the last I'll be talking about Ed Cooper or the Saints.
Ed Cooper has a lot of solo albums.
Right.
A lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
And still to this day, I mean, so I get into the Saints end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, and Ed Cooper, and he was super prolific at that time, putting out multiple albums a year under different guises too. But it's amazing to me that still in 2022, they fly very much under the radar for the average music fan. You know, when you think of punk rock, for most people, the Saints is just not a name that's going to come up, and practically nobody knows who Ed Cooper is. Yeah. And he's had this long, super prolific, brilliant recording
and what's
career.
Interesting is that there's no ties to Vanda and Young at all, which Vanda and Young are from the Easy Beats and basically made Australian music, and Albert Productions, which almost anything that you listen to from the 70s that comes from Australia was, Albert Productions. That's Vanda and Young's company. And and of course,
that's Young is in like Angus Young's Malcolm, right?
Yeah, George Young is the older brother of the Youngs and Malcolm from AC/DC. Okay.
Vanda and Young were behind the boards when AC/DC on their early albums, right?
And the Angels, which are another great 70s Australian band. But the Saints are not one of them.
Nope, because the Saints were out in the sticks. I mean, Vanda and Young, that would have been Sydney. You know, that was the big city. Brisbane was an outpost, just nowhere. Although that's where the Bee Gees did emigrate to. And when they first started having success in Australia, they did come out of Brisbane, but, obviously eventually made their way to Sydney and then to the UK. But the Bee Gees aren't Australian, folks. They're actually from Manchester originally. But yeah, so the Saints, punk pioneers, still very much underappreciated. So anyway, we're going to go in a completely different direction now. Sheryl was... we probably should have had you on earlier with Mike segueing from commercial use of music onto your track. But I wanted to separate myself because I'm going to finish the show here with my song choice. But anyway, yours is out of the vein of those great, lighthearted 70s tracks that we just love.
Nuggets, yeah. My last pick for 1977 is Jeans On by David Dundas. And this song actually did start out as a commercial jingle for Brutus jeans in the UK, which I'm guessing were like pretty hip and cool. In fact, they were actually one of the big brand names for the mod fashion and for the mods, like they were not necessarily jeans. I mean, this is more in the 60s that they were like the button-up shirts and, the more formal wear that the mods were into. But in the 70s, I guess Brutus jeans were big. So this song actually, it started out as a commercial jingle. And then David Dundas he kind of started out more actually in the TV and acting realm anyway. And then sort of crossed over into music from there. After this commercial became popular, he then recorded the song Jeans On, changed the lyrics a little bit, took out the name Brutus Jeans, and lengthened the song. And it became a hit for him. It was a hit in the UK. It was a top 5 hit in the UK in 76, actually. And then in 77, it made its way over to the US. And it wasn't as big of a hit here, but it was still popular. It sounds a little bit like a Harry Nilsson, sort of like, if you listen to the album, it has that vibe to it. Like a Harry Nilsson almost kind of pulls in the Beatles, like John Lennon, George Harrison solo, kind of their sounds to it as well.
So you've listened to the whole album?
I listened to the album, yeah. It definitely fits better as kind of a one-hit wonder. The album's not bad. I mean, it's actually, it's pretty good. It sounds a lot like a lot of stuff that was coming out at that time. And nothing necessarily stands out too much. But that song... Go ahead.
The song that I think of is Magic by Pilot.
Yeah.
Because the lyrics have something to do with it, too. Because when I wake up in the morning light,
yeah,
I put on my jeans. But it's kind of the same.
That's true. Lyric. And I mean, it is one of those songs. It's so catchy. And it's so singable. And it has that funny little... that they just kind of throw in there. So it is definitely a one-hit wonder. I mean, he had no other hits. He did have another song that was maybe like in the top 100, singles, but it wasn't anything bigger than a top 50.
Isn't he like from some wealthy family or royalty in England?
Yeah, he's Lord. He has Lord in his name. Like he is. He came from a privileged background. He was more in the acting realm initially. And then he went to Oxford and he was living in this house with Bruce Robinson. So he actually shared this house, a 3-bedroom house. 15 guys lived there. Bruce Robinson was one of them. He went on to write the script to the movie With Nail and I. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it's a cult classic British film.
Haven't seen it yet, but I'm definitely familiar with it.
So David Dundas actually did the soundtrack to the movie. He
Interesting.
Yeah. So he along with some other people like wrote the soundtrack to the movie, but it was based on this house that he lived in with Bruce Robinson, who wrote the script based on like their actual lives. And so David Dundas was one of the guys that lived in this house. So that's just kind of a interesting little tidbit about him. But anyway, that was the only song he had that was a hit. It was the only album he put out, I believe. Honestly, I wasn't even familiar with the song until we took a road trip one year. We're driving through like Wyoming or Montana or somewhere. We've got AM radio on, and we're just listening. And all of a sudden the song comes on and Mike is like, "Oh, I love the song," and he's singing along with it. I'm like, I've never heard this song before. What is this? This is like a really cool song. So we bring it up on Spotify or something. We played that song probably 50 times during that road trip because we just kept playing it over and over again. And then the kids were little. They were getting into it. They were singing it. And it's so singable. It's so sing-alongable.
It's great because it's such a nothing song.
Yes.
I mean, it's a guy singing about his jeans.
And it's been covered by Keith Urban now.
Yeah, it has. It has. Yep.
But it is you're right. It's just so catchy. And it's in that long list of these great 70s
one-hit wonders
songs that just put a smile on your face.
Totally.
There's just nothing angsty about it. It's just fun.
Just feels good.
Poppy. Yeah.
And it's funny because it's the reverse of the commercialism that we were talking about. It actually started as a commercial. And when you hear it, you're like, oh yeah, this is exactly what a commercial jingle is. It's sticky. It gets stuck in your head. You sing it over and over again. You can't get out of your head. And that's what it is. And really, I mean, it does kind of like exemplify the similarities between TV ad jingle commercialism and one-hit wonders like that just are just so infectious, like you can't get them out of your head. And
so I don't know, during our Christmas episode, I don't know, did we joke or riff on the Merry Christmas from Payless jingle? But that's a good example.
I don't think
it's just
so.
a little
Merry Christmas,
that little
from
snippet.
Payless.
Everybody who grew up in the Northwest who's our age remembers that.
Yes.
Merry Christmas from Payless.
But I think it's interesting, though, to think about these jingles, especially from the 80s, because jingles were huge in the 80s and the 70s and 80s. And this was before they were using songs in commercials. People were writing jingles specifically for commercials. So they were writing these songs that, they were made to get stuck in your head. That was the whole point. But that's what these one-hit wonders were, too.
One notable example in the early 70s.
Coke.
I think Mike probably knows. Yep. The new Seekers.
Yeah, the new
right?
Seekers.
I like to buy the world.
The world of Coke.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, that's basically
and that
how
was
this song
big.
started.
I mean, it was a commercial that became. Did it make number one?
I don't think so.
It was in the top 10 though.
It was a big song.
That was
our reference guy.
It was number 7, 11 weeks on the chart.
Okay, so that's a hit. If it's a top 10, that's a hit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we're just about out of time for 77, which is fine because my song is basically...
Wait. Yeah, Mike's got more to say. That's
Before
okay.
you go to yours, because I need to talk about the later discoveries of 77 a little bit. Really, in the end, are more important to me than Dickie Goodman.
Well, that's good to hear.
Elvis Costello, My Aim is True. And you talk about punk. The Sex Pistols, never mind the Bullocks. That was great. But I didn't get into it until a few years later when it came out. You talk about the Saints, and one album that I love that I equate with the Saints in that it is aggressive rock and roll, but it has this kind of pop. There's melodies that go through it. Is the Damned.
Oh, love that album. Yes.
And really, that was the first punk album put on record.
Yeah. And there's some similarities for me between that first Saints album and that first Damned album.
Well, they're drawing on the same source material.
Yeah.
The Stooges.
Then Television's Marquee Moon, probably one of my favorite albums of all time and very influential.
Yep.
And I think that was across the board, all three of us, Sheryl put that up for her album.
Yep.
Would have been right there in the mix for me too.
Yeah. And then another album that came out in 77 that was the first of the three greatest albums put out together by a group that influenced so much and were so artistic and so different. And that's Wire's Pink Flag, which in itself is just a punk album, but it is the springboard for what that band would put out in the next two albums, which were just so different. Kind of similar to another artist who put out a really great album in 77, but the album he put out in 77 was already in this line of weird, very artistic, great albums, and that's Brian Eno put out Before and After Science.
Yeah.
Which, the stuff that he was doing in that span, taking Tiger Mountain and Before and
Another
After
Green
Science.
World.
Yeah, amazing stuff. I mean, anyone who's into music needs to listen to those because that stuff influenced so many people after that, as did the Wire canon. The Talking Heads 77, not my favorite.
I feel like we've given that album short shrift in 1977.
Yeah, I think
but it's
because it's not my favorite Talking Heads album.
No,
but that doesn't diminish the fact that it's a great album.
Yeah,
it's just that it's not the one that I get most excited about.
It's kind of like the springboard.
Yeah,
again for
I like their next album better, but not a huge amount better.
Yeah.
Then Peter Gabriel's leaving Genesis and putting out his first album, Peter Gabriel, the Car album.
Mm-hmm. And I actually debated on Salisbury Hill or Jeans On.
And this is pretty mainstream, but still it wasn't an album I was into in 77 and wasn't into until a few years later, and it still is very impactful as Fleetwood Mac's Rumors. It's just an amazing album, really.
Yeah.
Neither Sheryl nor I put that up as our album, nor did we pick a track from it, but we dedicated a whole episode to Fleetwood Mac just to and we picked our favorite tracks from Rumors. Yep. And both of us picked Go Your Own Way as our favorite track.
Yep.
On the record.
And
what would be yours, Mike?
I would agree.
All right.
Yeah.
We've got a quorum.
Yeah. But it's just a great album front to back.
I mean, it's undeniably, it is every track on that album is essential. And that is rare to find an album.
And then,
that caliber.
Not David Bowie, anyone?
Well, so I'm
He's
not
going
done.
There.
I'm saving.
He's getting there.
So another one that if people haven't listened to that you kind of need to listen to that came out in 77 that opened, of course, this was something I didn't listen to until years later in the mid 80s. Congos, Heart of the Congos.
Essential reggae album.
Yeah, there's so many great reggae albums from the mid 70s, of course, but that's kind of an essential little nugget if people are interested. Pink Floyd's Animals.
Yeah.
A great album. And was just
I listened to that again today just to confirm, because it came down to that or the Saints album for me. And one thing I said to Sheryl when I was considering that album for my album of 77, I think of that as Pink Floyd's punk album. Now, the music isn't punk rock music, but the attitude and the vibe of the lyrics is very much in a punk vein.
To me, it's a precursor to The Wall, but I think that it handles it a little. It's not as in your face as The Wall is, and because of that, it is more beautiful. It's
the only reason why I think it has any connection to The Wall is that it's a more Roger Waters album, but it's very much.
Yes, it is. But the connection to The Wall is the tour that followed the album.
Yeah.
That's what inspired the wall. And Roger Waters and his reaction to the audiences on the tour and the confrontations he had with people in the audience and his frustrations over a lot of things that were happening, that fed into The Wall. But the lyrics are so bleak and dark and angry. And that's why I think it was their punk record. And also, it is just a showcase for David Gilmour on guitar.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've heard,
the beauty of it
just
right there.
It just got reissued and remixed, and it's really incredible. So
the 5.1 remix is amazing. I mean, it's like fully immersive, like definitely brings it into a whole other world.
That was my favorite Pink Floyd album when I was listening to Pink Floyd a lot as a young person in my teens, early 20s.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know that it would be now necessarily, but I still really like that album a lot.
And then I'll mention a couple more. Kraftwerk, Trans-Europa Express. It's not Autobahn, but still a great album.
It still is good, though.
And I referenced this Steely Dan's Asia. Cheap Trick's first album,
Steely Dan Asia, Steve Gadd on drums. Some of the most amazing drumming I've ever heard. So that's what makes that album to me.
And then kind of the odd album that came out in 1977 that actually had been years in the making, that if people haven't gone and listened to, it's worth a listen. It still holds up. Dennis Wilson's Pacific Ocean Blue is...
Love that album.
If you took Beach Boys, the band, and John Lennon and kind of put them together...
Well, we talked about the Beach Boys in the last episode, a couple episodes back, and kind of as a companion of those albums that came out kind of mid to later 70s for the Beach Boys, I would definitely throw that Dennis Wilson album in there too, that it is a must listen.
And then you asked about Bowie, and this will end my 77 retrospective of later discoveries for me. It is so interesting that there were 3 artists that put out 2 albums in 77, and both of the albums they put out are great albums. Not just, both of them are great. There was 3 artists. The first one, The Jam, with In the City and This Is the Modern World. Both put out in 77, both great albums. Then you've got Iggy Pop, Lust for Life, and The Idiot, which Bowie was involved with. Both are really good albums. Lust for Life, of course, is great, but The Idiot is really good. And then
The Idiot is more of a Bowie album than an Iggy Pop album. And then Iggy kind of grabs more control on the second one. Yeah.
But then there's Bowie, who puts out Low and Heroes.
Yeah.
In 77.
And really, you got to throw Brian Eno into that mix too with Before and After Science, because he produced those the Low and Heroes.
Yeah, it's like
with Bowie on those.
Did they ever sleep?
Well, you mentioned Cheap Trick, Mike. Cheap Trick put out 2 albums that year too. Their debut and In Color both came out in 77.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
In Color is a good album.
Really good album.
Yeah.
Couple more that I would throw out there. Jackson Browne's Running on Empty album came out in 1977, recorded kind of on the move on tour in different locations. Some of the songs actually recorded in hotel rooms and sound checks before concerts.
That was played constantly on the radio back then. And
yes.
I kind of liked it. I liked it like I liked Bruce Springsteen. It was kind of okay to listen to, but I didn't really, it didn't grab me yet. I was too young.
It's a little more sophisticated too, I think.
The second of the 2 Steve Miller albums that he recorded simultaneously, Book of Dreams, came out in 1977. Joni Mitchell's Don Juan's Reckless Daughter. The Eddie Money debut album. Now, I just listened to that for the first time. I don't know that every song is going to be a winner there, but the players and the production, first class all the way. He's got Lonnie Turner and Gary Malaber in the rhythm section, and then Jimmy Lyons, great guitar player. And then Bruce Botnick was the producer on that album. So it's a great sounding record. Of course, the 2 singles are both outstanding. Baby Hold On and 2 Tickets to Paradise.
Yeah, good songs.
Parliament, maybe their best album, came out that year. Funkadelic versus the Placebo Syndrome. The Ramones, Rocket to Russia. which of course has Cretin Hop, has Sheen as a punk rocker, Rockaway Beach, their cover of Do You Want to Dance? Great record. What else?
I, Robot, Alan Parsons project.
I, Robot, yeah. Sheryl nearly had that. She had a last minute change and went Marquee Moon instead of I, Robot. Weather Report's Heavy Weather had their best known song, which is Birdland. I think we've all heard that musical theme and production music somewhere along the line. Da 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 da. So yeah, a lot of great stuff came out in 77. And the last song we're going to put on our playlist, which I'm not going to talk much about because it is a preview of 1978. And 78 was a year almost completely dominated by the Brothers Gibb, the Bee Gees. So Saturday Night Fever, the movie came out late in 77. The soundtrack came out late in 77. The first two Bee Gees singles off that soundtrack came out in 77 with Staying Alive and How Deep Is Your Love? So that was a tough call for me, choosing one or the other. Now, Staying Alive obviously is iconic. That's the song that plays behind the opening shot of the movie with John Travolta walking down the street. It's an incredible movie. And I think people who weren't aware of what the movie's about or saw it at the time probably go into it thinking it's like Grease, like it's like a musical.
Or Xanadu.
It's not a musical. It is it's a dramatic movie, and it's rated R. It is, it's got some harrowing stuff in it. It's an excellent movie. But the soundtrack dominated into 1978, and the Bee Gees, not just with their 3 number one hit records off that one soundtrack, plus another number one from Yvonne Elliman on the soundtrack. But the Bee Gees were writing and producing songs for others, and everything they touched was gold in 1978. So we're going to have at least one episode where all we talk about is the Bee Gees' career and their disco dominance during this era.
In 1978, also Andy Gibb, too.
Right. Yeah. One of the brothers Gibb. Wasn't a Bee Gee.
No.
But also certainly could have been.
Yeah, and also had huge hits in that year in 78.
Another guy who had a massive amount of talent. Unfortunately, never realized it himself. But I'm going to go with the love ballad. I'm going to go with How Deep Is Your Love? And that's going to be my final submission for 1977. But we will talk more about that song and that group when we get into the year 1978. We'll also talk about my first favorite album, the first album I ever got. And I'm not sure it's going to endure as my album selection for the year because there are some great records that came out in 1978. A lot of them I came to know and enjoy later on in life. So I don't know that that's going to hold up or not. And we're going to be picking a dozen songs for 1978. I can't
believe we're actually moving on to a new year.
Finally. All right. So we got our 10 songs for 1977, a dozen coming up for 1978 as we barrel on inexorably towards the 1980s on Matt and Sheryl's Gen Excellent playlist. Mike, thanks for joining us again. I'm sure you're going to be popping in again during 1978 to lend us your thoughts and expertise.
If we have 12 songs in 1978, we might need a little bit of help to pad the playlist.
We got to get Mike in there at least once each year. Sheryl, have you thought about 78 yet? Any sneak previews for 78 for you?
Not really, because all I can think of when I think of 78 is the Bee Gees. So I have to start thinking beyond Bee Gees, but I haven't yet.
We had the Bee Gees and Grease, obviously big in 1978 as well. We'll be talking about that among a dozen songs and 2 album picks. Mike will give his favorites for the year as well. But until then, you've been listening to Matt and Sheryl's Gen Excellent playlist. I'm Matt.
I'm Sheryl.
We'll talk to you next time.